Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey in Your Own Backyard. I am Rob and joined, as always, by Carter. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man.
RUM, the Caribbean. We're going on a little trip tonight.
I'm ready to go to the islands, man.
I know absolutely zero about rum.
Finally, I know something more than you do.
Well, finally.
Yeah,
I'm glad you said it.
It took all
I
these
think
episodes.
it a lot, but I didn't want to say it. I'm like,
it's
damn,
cool.
This guy doesn't know anything. But anyway, glad we finally hit a subject that you're sharp with.
I'm certainly not going to be as knowledgeable as our expert panel here.
Is it okay if we call you guys experts? Is that a title you guys?
I was wondering when the experts were going to arrive.
Right. So we got Tyler Martin and Doug Carrol have been nice enough to come on and join us to do this episode. I think about spirits. I think we all probably agree with this, that when you get into whether it's wine or bourbon or scotch or whatever, I think back in the old days, I say old days, maybe 20, 30 years ago, I think people kind of found what they liked and they kind of stayed in that lane. I think not just in spirits, I think in food and everything, that people are really, when they find something they like, whether it's food or whiskey or coffee or whatever it might be, they go, well, where else can this go? And that lane turns into a single lane into a 15-lane highway or whatever it might be.
It's unfortunate with that? For the pocketbook.
It is. But you guys kind of agree with that?
Oh, 100%, yeah.
Okay.
I think once you find something interesting, you just want to find more interesting stuff.
Yeah, and I think it just kind of shifts to different things. It doesn't have to be just, bourbon leads me to go, I want to try Scotch, or I want to try Irish whiskey, or I want to try Japanese whiskey, and it's led me to go, I want to try tequila, and now here we are going, I want to kind of explore a little bit of rum, and all I've known is, Cap Morgan.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Silence. Carter, that's not a good one to talk about, I guess.
Yeah, you want to talk about, the spirits industry is very heavily driven by marketing, obviously. Sure. And, Captain Morgan's just an iconic figure in the spirits world that everybody knows what that is. And, mix it with Coke and do all right. But, I wouldn't go much further than that.
Like a Jack Daniel's Old Number 7.
Oh, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
For people listening.
I would say Jack Daniel's is more acceptable than Captain Morgan, but
absolutely,
I would too.
At least Jack Daniel's is just good, plain bourbon.
Yeah, it's not a bunch of other stuff.
Delicious Tennessee bourbon.
Had to throw that in there.
Yeah, good plain Tennessee bourbon. Yeah.
I like how you slid that in there.
That's what she said.
There you go.
Got him.
I'm not. So we have something in our glass right now, and I've not tried it ever before. It's a cool bottle, so there's that.
That's a cool bottle.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about this,
which is also a red flag, by the way. All right, I hope you know that.
Yeah, we've got a few things on the table, and I think it's interesting when you look at the different packages. I think there is kind of an inverse relationship between the package and the quality of what's in it sometimes. This one's getting a little nicer. They've got like the little sash thing around the 4-square bottle, but the label's very straightforward. But what we have now, this is from a very, very big distillery in the Dominican Republic called Brugal. And this is the 1888. I think it's 80 proof, double barreled, so ex-bourbon, ex-sherry. This is, when I first got into rum, I was on a trip down to the Virgin Islands and had this at a bar and thought, this is really good. I need to find this when I get home. And I did. And it's fun. This is the first time I've drank it in years. And revisiting it now, I'm like, this is so bad.
Oh, really?
Compared to the other things on the table, it's so bad.
That's the journey.
That's the journey.
This is the rabbit hole we go down. So and I think it's probably a good idea to kind of go through a little bit of Caribbean history. You'll notice that some of the rums we brought, they kind of hit a few different islands that are more predominantly the rum-producing islands. You obviously have, Bacardi in Puerto Rico, formerly in Cuba, and in U.S. Virgin Islands, you have Cruzan that makes a massive amount of rum. But when you get to sort of the high-end rum world, it's split partially by the English colonies. So you have Jamaica, Barbados, St. Lucia, and Guyana in the northern part of South America, and then you have all the Spanish colonies. You have the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Cuba.
Yep.
Probably missing a couple there. But what ended up happening, all these rum has been around for a very long time, right? It was originally distilled in the 1600s. And in the 1600s, they only had pot stills. And then eventually in the mid 1800s, they started developing column stills, and you could put out a lot more product. And the British tended to kind of rebel against that. That's why Scotch whiskey is predominantly pot still whiskey. Mm-hmm. And then you get to blended whiskey, and then they kind of put their nose up about that because you're using a column still at that point. So the English colonies tended to stick with the pot stills. The Spanish colonies didn't really care about that so much. We're more, let's just put out a whole bunch of rum.
Well, and it was also that the column still was invented by an Irishman, so the English could not accept that.
Oh, that's true.
Coffee.
Mr. Coffee.
Yeah.
Not the drink. So in the DR, this is a good entry, I think, to something that people would typically think of like a sipping whiskey or sipping rum.
I was just going to throw in real quick. You mentioned the English, the Spanish, also the French colonies.
Oh yeah, French. We'll get to that.
Yeah. So it's basically those three are the rum producers of the world, former colonies or current territories of those three.
Is there anything in like South America that's
Brazil makes a massive amount of rum.
Well, called cachaça, right? Have you heard of cachaça?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So when you think about making rum and you talk about the 1600s, was it an accident, or was this, you hear a lot about things just kind of fermented and they went, oh, look, you can get a little buzz off this or whatever. Was this something, that part of the history? Was it an accident?
I don't know that the rum industry itself knows its true beginnings.
Okay.
They're fairly certain that it was slaves in Barbados that first had the idea to make sugarcane into a fermented beverage. And it was basically just a wine, a sugar wine that they would mix with different herbs and stuff to drink. And then somebody said, well, it's got alcohol in it. You can distill it, so let's try that. I think the Dutch were probably the ones.
Yeah, there's some. It's obviously you think of the 1600s in the Caribbean, and like the record keeping probably wasn't the best.
Yeah.
And probably a lot of the records that were kept, they're in that hot, humid environment, and they kind of fall apart. But the research I've heard is that they believe that it may have come from Dutch that were coming from Brazil, but a lot of the first records are in Barbados, being the first ones to have a distilled spirit. They called it Kill Devil before they called it rum, and then later I think the term was rum bouillon or something like that. And it was a rowdy drink, and I'm sure it was probably completely unaged and probably very high proof.
Yep.
Yeah, and it was kind of one of those things where the guys would drink it and start fighting and get in a lot of
Aged rum
trouble.
aged rum is actually kind of a recent phenomenon, recent in the history of rum, probably within the last 70, 80 years. Before then, almost all rum was unaged. If it was aged, it was because it was put in a barrel on a ship to go somewhere, and it picked up some age. But
when you say unaged, you're talking about
right off the still.
They put it in bottles.
Yep.
Yeah.
Really?
Maybe cut it with water.
Still to this day, in a lot of the Caribbean, most of the rum that's consumed in the Caribbean is unaged.
Like you go to Jamaica, the vast majority of locals are drinking unaged rum.
Yeah,
well, I did not know.
Yeah, they do. I've been there before to Jamaica. Jan and I went once.
Well, it's also much cheaper as unaged. Yeah.
But it's a lot of overproof rum is what I've noticed.
Yeah, so Ray and Nephew's the real popular one in Jamaica, which is that's the parent company of Appleton. But you'll also see other Caribbean islands. In Martinique, we'll get to Martinique, but they'll mostly drink a unaged white rum. In the agricole style that they do in Martinique, but like St. Lucia too, they'll do it unaged. St. Lucian rum. It's much cheaper. It's just more affordable, and it goes great as a mixer. A lot of times they'll mix some soda or fruit juice or something like that.
Oh yeah, ting in Jamaica.
Yeah,
I do that's something interesting. Like when I think of mixed drinks. I guess a lot of people think of whiskey and different things like that, but to me, when I think cocktails, particularly like beach cocktails, rum all the way. That's
so summer cocktails.
Yeah,
it's kind of the spirit.
It can be, but if you have like I mean, maybe we're going down a different path here, but if you have like a painkiller or something, that's that has the nutmeg on top, I kind of think that could be fall time,
Well, there's never a wrong time for it. But yeah, I mean, I consume more rum in the summer than I do in the winter, but that doesn't mean that you can't.
So
Right.
I see that obviously, I mean, common sense would say if it's a clear rum, it's a white rum, it doesn't touch a barrel. So the color comes from the barrel
Well, not necessarily true.
So my question was going to be, do they put this in like stainless steel and do any kind of aging in something?
No.
Okay.
But what I was going to say is there are white rums that are aged. So they will age them and filter them to filter all the color out.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's some very popular ones that you'll see in a lot of cocktails and you would have no idea, but they're aged 2 or 3 years and then filtered to the point that they're just completely clear again.
Yeah, and it's just part of the laws in the particular country they're in. There's some of the Caribbean countries require all rum to be aged to like 2 years. So they age it 2 years in barrels, and then they will filter it very heavily to where it's back to a clear liquid.
Does that filtering get rid of any of the flavor that you get from the barrel?
Yes.
It would have to.
Because I'm going, well, you're kind of, why are you doing that? You know what I mean?
Just purely because of the laws.
Yeah,
that you have to.
But I mean, why would you want a clear? What's the point of having the clear? Why do they want the white? Why are they
There's a lot of drinks like a daiquiri that are more aesthetically
okay.
pleasing with a white rum.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I prefer a daiquiri with aged rum, but it starts looking kind of brownish and it's not nearly as nice looking. But there's a lot of other drinks that are similar that you want a clear spirit for it.
Okay, so if somebody's going to start getting into, when I think about bourbon, and we have people who go, not into bourbon, I want to get into bourbon, we always talk to them about, I talk to them about, finding distillers, good distillers,
Yes.
starting with their base products. Don't try to go looking for all the crazy stuff that you might see in bourbon groups. But then also proof is important, because
Sure.
your palate getting used to that. Bourbon has a big fluctuation in what proof can be to be a bourbon. Is rum, if I think about cognac or something like that, it's always pretty much, 80 to 90, maybe you see a little bit more than that, but generally it's in that 80 to 90 range. Does rum kind of have a range, or can it go?
Huge.
Is it? It's big as
I
bourbon?
mean, it used to be one of those things where everything was 80 proof, but now we have a lot more access to higher end specialty spirits. So I mean, we've got stuff on this table that goes up to 100, 120 proof.
Yep.
From anywhere from 80 to 120. You typically see stuff there's a lot that's just the minimum 40% alcohol, 80 proof, and then you start to get a few that are like 90. And then there's kind of a jump to where you get into like cast strength rum, which is typically around 120.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so kind of to answer your question, the first piece of advice that I usually give people is if you buy rum from countries or places that were former colonies of the English or the French, you're going to be safe. Some of the Spanish ones, that's where you get into a lot more of the flavorings and colorings and things like that. And there's a reason for that. Before the podcast started, we were talking about if you go to the average distillery in, say, Puerto Rico, it looks more like a chemical plant. It's these huge multi-column stills that they look more like, a fractionation unit at a refinery than they do a pot still. And so you're stripping so much flavor out of that rum that you've got to add something to it. So that's where the sugar comes in, or flavoring, or whatever it might be, because it's basically vodka at that point.
Yeah.
As opposed to some of these, like some of the Foursquare, they use a column, but they're using a different type of column, and they're distilling to a lower proof. So there's just more stuff left.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'd also like to say that I think people, if you're listening to this and you saw rum in the title and you clicked on it because you wanted to learn a little something about rum, I think a lot of us know what it is as far as a spirit. We see it behind the bar. We know people who drink it. Much like bourbon, when I got into bourbon, I didn't know what the mash bill was, what that recipe was. I'm not sure everybody just knows right out of the chute that sugarcane is the star of this spirit.
Yep.
I mean, that's really what makes it what it is.
And that's why it's really made in the islands, right? I mean, sugarcane is abundant.
That's right. Yeah.
And maybe a good segue. We can jump to a different island here. Give you a total different experience. You probably want a different glass. Actually, this stuff is just so different.
I'm curious. What do y'all think about this one? First
It's
one we're
not
drinking.
bad. It's a little, to me, it's a little on the thin side, you know.
I think it's a tease. I'm like, I feel like there's something there, and I want a bigger punch of it.
Yeah.
I think the nose is a little misleading because, like, when
Seems
I
like it's
smell
gonna
it,
be heavy.
I feel like it's going to be like real viscous and heavy. And,
Yeah,
you know,
and it's
and
not.
then you kind of you get into it. It's like, it's a little fleeting, you know.
And that's the multi-column still for you. There's just not a lot of body left to the spirit. To me, this one almost is even a little bit artificial tasting.
Does this have any additional sugars added?
Oh, for sure, lots of,
I believe
added sugar. I have not looked up to see exactly what the grams per liter is on it, but I would guess this is probably in the 30 to 40 range,
and
which is hot, very high.
is there a good place? And that's something I wanted to ask. I mean, I know we were kind of jumping a little bit, but is there a good resource to find, like, because to me, like, the sugar thing, I'm not big into that. You know, I don't want to, like, have a bunch of additional, like, sugar additive and things like that. Is there a good resource to find, like, you know, hey, this is one you could probably need to steer away from, and this is one.
My go-to for rum reviews is a guy based in the UK. His website is thefatrumpirate.com. And he just really excellent rum reviews. But he also has a feature on his website where there's just a list of all the rums that you've ever heard of. And you can type in the name, and it will tell you the list added sugar in grams per liter. So anything under 5 is usually something you're not going to taste. Anything that could be just sugar that's actually drawn out of the barrel. But you get into stuff that's like 20 to 40 grams per liter. It gets quite syrupy.
It gets that high?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Oh yeah. I mean, some of the stuff I joke it'd be good on pancakes because it's that sticky.
Wow.
Well, one off the top of my head that I know is very high is the Plantation XO. It's 40 or 42, and you can taste it. It is extremely sweet.
And price on something like that?
The Plantation XO is
like
not
$40.
cheap. Yeah, it's
Oh, wow.
yeah.
So what's the attraction to that? Who's drinking that? 'Cause it doesn't sound like
Well, I
something I
mean,
would.
there's a reason why people put additives in all kinds of spirits. Rum seems to have more of it because of the country. You can't do that in Scotch whiskey. You literally, people would like try to murder you.
Yeah.
The Scotch Whiskey Association would come after you for putting sugar in Scotch whiskey. So where was I going with that? It tends to be more so in rum, but when you have a harsh spirit, adding sugar kind of smooths it out. And the other thing they'll use like a prune wine, and also it kind of adds some body to the spirit.
But I think when you get to that, you described it as syrupy almost.
Yeah.
Put it on pancakes. I'm going, okay, is that for a cocktail more than it is for a sipping rum?
No, you'd be surprised.
Really?
These are advertised as like high-end sipping rums, but people love sweet stuff. They really do.
Yeah.
And I think there's a misconception that rum is supposed to be sweet because it's made from sugar. Well, all alcohol is made from sugar.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
the sugar in potatoes or corn or whatever it might be. So the fact that the substrate is sugarcane versus something else really doesn't matter. But people think made from sugar, it's supposed to be sweet. So in your mind, you're thinking, tropical drinks and things that are sweet. Like this is supposed to be a sweet product.
Yeah.
So it's also, I think, marketing. Yeah, it's to rough out the edges on some not so great spirits, but I think it's also a bit of making people, making a product that it's what people expect. So they're
Yeah.
expecting a sweet product, so
And that
that's
makes
what they
sense.
deliver.
And like, to me, like, before I kind of knew a little bit about rum cocktails and things like that, you just think about a daiquiri being like, the stuff that you squirt out of a jar or whatever, mixed in with like a sweet. I mean, it's just like, that's not a traditional daiquiri.
Right.
That's just what
I've had
we've
that-
been taught.
I've had that experience, yeah. Order a daiquiri at a bar, and they're like, "There's some kind of strawberry syrup." I'm like, "Well, no. This is not what I was. I was going for lime, sugar, and rum. That's all I wanted."
Yeah.
Well, growing up in Louisiana, when you say daiquiri, I think of the drive-through shops.
Oh, yeah,
And-
there you
go. Yeah.
So I was well out of college before I realized that a daiquiri was something other than that. So
That's a good point.
So if you want to go straight to the sugar cane, you go to Martinique, and you get what we're we've just poured, which is called a rum agricole. They called it that because this was the type of rum that was kind of made. It was agricultural rum. It was made on the farm. So it was made straight from the freshly pressed sugarcane. I'm not sure what Clement's process is these days, but you really don't need to add any yeast to sugarcane juice. It's got plenty of natural yeast that lives on the outside of the sugarcane. It will ferment completely on its own, and distilled, and as a white rum. And this stuff, it's just a completely different category. Almost all the rest of the rums we have here are based on molasses. So there's kind of two ways you can make rum from sugarcane. One is just press the juice, ferment the juice, and distill that. Or you process the sugarcane juice, extract the crystal sugar, and then you're left with molasses, and then you can ferment the molasses mixed with water, and then distill that, which is what most of the British island, almost all the British islands, they're doing that. Probably most of the Spanish rums as well are all based on a molasses product, because when you press sugarcane, it starts fermenting immediately. So
really?
You have to be very quick about controlling the fermentation and then distilling it right away.
And so what that means is most of these islands, they can't grow enough sugarcane to actually make their own rum, and so they have to import a lot of it. So somewhere that is importing something, it's a lot easier to import molasses than giant bales of sugarcane.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
it just became so much more economic to use molasses for a lot of places.
But this gets you. This is it's kind of closer to the source of a raw sugarcane product, and it has some notes that are, to me, are more reminiscent of like a tequila, which is also straight from the plant to the distillation. Where other rums, you got that extra processing step where you're making molasses. So it's got that kind of vegetal
Yeah, I was going to say
notes to it, grassy. Sugarcane is a grass, so it's a lot of those types of flavors coming through.
Well, the tequila, when you said that, that's exactly what I was thinking. That's what it kind of reminded me of at first.
It does have that vegetal kind of smell, but like kind of an earthy, like I don't know, like it's really interesting. The nose is really.
I don't get
Nice
the
on it,
sweetness and the
actually.
spice on this like I did on the first one at all.
There's no sugar.
Yeah, no sugar at all.
No.
No.
And Doug,
It's actually
I think,
illegal in Martinique to add sugar.
In Jamaica.
This is one of the few places in the world they actually have like
an AOC.
it's an AOC. So it's they have a very tight set of
Just
regulations.
like wine in
just
France.
like a Chianti. Like it can only be grown on certain parts of the island. You can't even grow it anywhere on Martinique. They have it. It's very. There's a thick set of regulations to make rum agricole.
That is interesting.
This is completely different than what I think of when I think rum. I think that sweetness, that spice, that fruit.
Boy, this would be great in a cocktail, though. I think like this.
It's become a
absolutely.
cocktail darling over the past several years. People it makes some really, really interesting drinks. And it may be a rum cocktail that you are very familiar with, and you throw that in, and you get something completely different now.
That's really nice. I like that a lot.
It's not my favorite. I think Doug likes agricole a little more than I do. It's never really spoken to me the way it does to others, but I can appreciate
There's
it.
a couple.
But
I
oddly,
really like. There's a producer called Nissan in Martinique.
That's really
I think
good.
it's like it's this times 10 in quality. It's really, really special stuff.
Now, I will say one that I really love is from Haiti, and it's called Claran. It's their version of rum they call Claran. It's Haitian Creole for clear. It's an unaged spirit that, for the most part, is just everyday farmers that are literally just making it out, behind their house.
Really?
And it's from
Moonshine.
sugarcane juice. It basically is sugarcane juice distilled to a really high proof. It's got some of those similar kind of vegetal characters, but it leans a little bit more towards the Jamaican side with some kind of funk to it. It also has, a lot of people think this is weird, one of them that I have kind of almost tastes like pork fat. There's a very like meaty, porky flavor to it. It's some of those Clarins get really interesting.
It reminds me of like mezcal compared
Yep.
to tequila, where it's just like the range of flavors is a lot wider.
You don't really know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
So this one we're having right now, is there anything else in the lineup that would be similar to this?
Well, we do have actually an aged rum from the same distillery from Clermont in Martinique.
Oh.
And I'm not sure what the age on this one is. It's called I'm gonna butcher some French right now. It's Homer Clermont. But this is like their sort of high end aged blend. I haven't had this in a while. I actually got this from a guy that bought this bottle. It's about $110 bottle. And he tasted it, and he just didn't like it. And he just said, hey, anybody want to pick this up? And I immediately drove to his house because I think it's actually a pretty good bottle of rum.
I mean, is it okay if I try
Yeah,
it?
no, absolutely. No,
Not
yeah,
yet.
please.
Not yet. We're gonna. Is this now or is it
No,
later?
let's do this like right after
it would be a good
because we just had
comparison,
the unaged Clermont.
So go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
How does this work?
Um,
Is it a twist or
turn harder.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to break anything here.
Anybody need a water?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll take one. Thank you.
So you don't see a ton of unaged agricole rum, but when you do, it's usually pretty good.
Okay, so clear
That is a
and
heavy
brown.
bottle.
Clear and brown. That's the only two you're going to see in rum.
Oh, that's a
'Cause
whole. No, there's an interesting discussion there. For a long time, you've probably heard of like gold rum or
Yeah.
dark rum.
Yeah.
And it's like it's one of those things in bourbon. It's like these words, they're marketing words, right? They don't really. There's not like a technical.
So I was thinking
definition.
tequila. You know how
Yeah.
you have the
Sure,
blanco.
añejo,
Yeah.
and, reposado,
Yeah.
and, things like that. Yeah. Well, I mean, those actually do have a definition,
Right.
Because it's it's like in the Mexican law. In
in the
the
way you
rum
make it.
world, you get into gold rum or dark rum or terms like XO, and who knows what that
Is
it-
XO
it's whatever that particular company wants it to mean.
Outside of Martinique, that is. Because
Outside
they
of-
will use terms
That's
like
true.
XO or VSOP that have French designations.
Yeah, that would make sense.
One of the big misconceptions in rum, you'll hear this term thrown around a lot, is there are no rules in rum. And so you can kind of do whatever you want. That's completely not true.
Right.
What's different is you have 20 different countries making
yes,
rum
exactly.
that have their own rules. So it's not like all Scotch comes from Scotland, all cognac comes from France. So they control.
So it's just a process,
What
not
it
a
is.
location where it comes from.
Rum is akin to whiskey. Whiskey is made all over the world in different styles. Rum is on that same kind of tier or hierarchy, if you will.
I mean, in the U.S., the only definition of rum is it's distilled from sugarcane.
That's it.
and that's
That's
it.
it.
Wow. Okay.
Huh.
Now, there are other countries like Martinique or France or Jamaica that do have something called a geographic indication, or GI, that's kind of similar to an AOC, where they say this is the process you have to use to be able to label your rum as Jamaican rum. You can make it here and ship it somewhere else and just call it Caribbean rum or just nothing, but it can't say Jamaican rum unless you make it according to this process.
Can I ask a stupid question? Is there anything else other than sugarcane that's in the mash of this of rum? It's all sugarcane.
Well,
Not-
it's either sugarcane juice or molasses.
That's it.
Now,
And
the
water.
the one exception, and it's not called rum, but cachaça will also have some other starches sometimes that go into it. But that's why it's never labeled rum. It's in the family, but it's not. It's not
Okay.
purely rum because there are.
Oh yeah, and I think
other
in
things.
Indonesia they have there's a spirit called arak, which it's sort of a combination of, I think it's sugarcane juice and rice.
which is what's in cachaça most of the time.
Okay.
Usually rice is the other filler that they use.
Okay.
Okay. 'Cause you say rice, and I'm automatically thinking like sake, a rice wine type of. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
interesting. I would have never thought that would have been used with rum.
Oh yeah,
So when people get into rum, just like anything, you kind of want to get in watching your dollar, so to speak, because you don't want to buy, what somebody might tell you is a really nice bottle for, upwards of $50+ and then you go, I don't like it. So is rum, because I've kind of always heard that if you want good rum, you got to pay for it.
no,
So there's some
No,
good,
there's some great values in rum. They're definitely below the radar.
there are better values in rum maybe than any other spirit. There are some
Really?
I
$15
think
to
that's-
$20
I think that's
rums
correct.
that are top tier.
okay.
Oh
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
And to go back to your comment about what your advice to people getting into bourbon. It totally applies to rum.
Okay.
You should pick some major distilleries that you kind of understand. They have a very good reputation. and kind of start with their kind of flagship products, and then you can kind of branch out from there. So, I mean, that's the thing about rum is there are very few distilleries in the Caribbean. I mean, the list is, I don't know, maybe 24. It's not a long list. And then per island, you might only have, like Barbados has 4 distilleries, and that's like a lot for one island.
St. Lucia has 1.
St. Lucia has 1, right? Martinique actually has quite a lot.
There are several islands that have none. I don't think there's a commercial one on places like St. Martin or St. Bart's.
Right. So, I mean, that's what, and I think maybe we can go to this next. We can go to Barbados here, and we'll get into something there's some great deals that you can get on some amazing Barbados rum. There's a distillery there that's become very famous called Foursquare for making some of the top rums in the world. And some of the bottles we can try some of this later, but some of these they're going for retail now of $120 a bottle, which can be a bit much for somebody who's kind of not sure about the category. But to counter that, the same distillery is putting out a couple different brands. There's the Real McCoy brand, which we have some to taste here. They also have a brand called Dorley's, but it's very similar to like Buffalo Trace, right? They have Buffalo Trace, and they've got E.H. Taylor and
all the same
blends,
Nashville, but different.
and it's very similar production, but it's just a different marketing thing. So they've got Real McCoy. Dorley's is kind of their like baseline, their bread and butter brand. They also have one called RL Seal, which is their family name, and then there's the Foursquare, what they call the exceptional cask selection, which is like the highest end stuff.
Yeah. So and then you have a very famous independent bottler from Italy called Velier that will put out things from Foursquare, among other places. They'll put things out from.
So they source
other
from
places.
there, and then
they do.
Do they do something different to the product other than put their
No, and it's usually a collaboration. So Richard Seal, he's the owner and he runs Foursquare. He'll work directly with the guy's name is Luca Gargano. He's the owner of Velier. They'll really collaborate on, okay, what's the next one we're going to do, and they'll plan something. So it's not just, hey, give me X number of liters of your rum, I'm going to go bottle it.
Those are also, they tend to be, $150 kind of bottles. Like they're very expensive.
They're the B-Tacker rum.
If you go to Total Wine, you can get a Dorley's 12-year-old rum from Foursquare for like $25.
Oh,
It
really?
may even be under 20.
It may even sometimes you can get. Sometimes they run discounts and it's like $20.
And the
it's
Dorley's
pretty amazing.
XO it's usually like 16 or 17, and it's
And XO
fantastic.
means the same like in cognac, extra old.
Yeah,
It's got more age on
It doesn't really mean anything legally.
Oh, okay.
They
They don't have an age statement on that. They do have one. They have an RL Seal 10-year that comes in a funny looking black bottle.
I've had it.
It looks sort of like an old like pirate's like wine.
It's kind of got like a crooked.
Yeah, it's got a
top
crooked
to it,
top to it. But that one has a 10-year age statement. So it's 10-year-old Caribbean rum for again like $25, which is amazing.
I buy that. I know I found it at Total Wine because I bought that bottle before, and holy crap! I opened that. I didn't expect much because I think it was actually on discount.
And for anybody listening, if you want to find Dorley's in the U.S., you have to get it from Total Wine.
Yeah.
They have an
Is that
exclusive,
right?
Yeah,
they have an
Dorley's
exclusive
and
contract.
the RL Seal 10 are only at Total Wine, but because of their exclusive relationship, it also means the pricing's like really, really good.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's good to know because Total Wine is pretty much everywhere for the most part.
Yeah.
So,
But you're not going to be able to go to your local store or even large stores like Specs. They don't carry Dorley's. They do carry one bottle of the RL Seal now, but it's quite a bit more expensive than a similar bottle at Total Wine. So it's just a relationship they've had for a long time.
Yeah.
If you want to go find it, that's where to go.
So a quick question though, so Real McCoy, so that's part of the RL Seal brands.
Actually, no. Real McCoy is actually owned by someone else, but it's from Foursquare and it's a collaboration. But the other ones are
Yeah, there's
owned
actually
by-
a filmmaker that he made a documentary about I can't remember the guy's first name, but the guy that was the Real McCoy, who was a bootlegger, and he would buy barrels of rum during Prohibition in Barbados and sail to outside of New York and sit just outside the the U.S. line there, and they'd have boats come out to pick up rum, and the whole story was that they were getting a lot of strange products with weird additives, and he said no, this is he got that reputation. This is the real McCoy because it was 100% straight Barbados rum, no additives, no nothing.
What you'll notice on the front of this bottle, unlike some other source things, it says in very conspicuous letters, Foursquare Distillery, and even says signed by Master Distiller Richard Seal. So they're very upfront by saying this is a Foursquare product.
And this particular one, a 12-year age statement.
And
Yeah,
did you say price on this?
This I want to say retailed for $45 or $50, but this is several years old.
This is a limited edition.
Okay. Not on the shelf. Not really.
Well, they've done several other limited editions. There's been a 12, a couple of different 14s. There was a 10.
So price fluctuates a little bit.
But I think they were running around $40, $50.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the 14, one of them might have crept up close to 60 maybe, but...
So I want to make a comment, then I have a question. Comment is, tell me again what we poured to compare to that first clear that we had. This is the same style, but this is aged.
That's an aged, Homer Clement is the...
That I like way better.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Me too.
The barrel just smooths everything out and
It's one of those things.
rounds it out.
I think it being like whiskey guys, we're used to barrel aged spirits,
Okay.
and we like that
It's more familiar.
vanilla and the caramels that comes out of the barrel.
I do think that I just got finished with that one.
And Carter.
That's a cool bottle. Yeah, very heavy. You could do some damage to somebody with that bottle. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. I think that just made it. I can appreciate the clear spirit, and I think it's really good. I think it's actually would be really good in a cocktail. That's kind of where I'd go with it.
The real reason I wanted to bring that was because I think that's like the closest you really get to like the sugar cane in the spirit. And I mean, everything kind of goes back to, that is what rum is it's a sugar cane product.
And to me, it's interesting to drink a clear spirit that has a lot of character and a lot of flavor because
You don't expect it.
people also think, oh, clear, it's going to taste like vodka. But
You mean no taste?
Yeah, just not really taste like anything. But that has a distinct character.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you taste that and you know it's rum.
Oh yeah, I mean it's like wow, holy crap! Like it smacks you in the face.
That being said, I don't often drink unaged rum at home on its own.
Not very often.
Not very often.
Cocktail.
Almost exclusively cocktails.
Boy, I just went to that Real McCoy, which I'm a
Hey, man, you're jumping. Were we supposed to be drinking?
we're
that?
going there talking
about it. I didn't know we were pouring it. You're kind of like a drunk.
well, I'm not pouring these heavy ass pours that you are.
Okay, here's the question I had. When I talk to people about wine or whiskey, I always tell them, there's that law of diminishing return. There's that, when you pay more than X amount of dollars, whatever you define that to be for you. For me, like $100 bottle of wine, anything more than that, you're paying because it's rare.
Status symbol stuff.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Does rum kind of have that where you go, okay, once you get over a certain price, because at this price point or below, you can get great stuff. You don't need to spend $200 on a bottle of
Like we
rum.
said, it's kind of weird because I feel like because rum
almost.
is kind of like there aren't a ton of people into rum, so there's still some like killer deals where, I mean, like that RL Seal 10-year, I think that's a world class rum for $25.
Okay.
And there's also not a lot of stuff. There are very, very few rums on the shelf that are more than $150 retail. It's pretty rare that you'll find one. So there's not quite the huge range of price that there is in something like wine, where there's everything from $5 to thousands of dollars.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or even whiskey, where there can be a huge range. I'd say for me, $30 is probably the point that you can get a lot of really good stuff below that level.
Yeah, I think if you're starting out, like, I wouldn't, a lot of people, they want to go out and buy like an $80 bottle because to impress their friends or something. And there's actually a lot of $80 bottles of rum that are not very good, that are actually really kind of crap.
So there's and yes, I agree. But there's something that I've seen kind of like brought out before with age statements, and there's some brands that aren't on the table that have had some like age statements on there that aren't necessarily true.
That almost exclusively happens in Spanish countries.
That's another reason why Tyler and I are big proponents of Jamaica, Barbados, St. Lucia, Martinique, nobody in any of those countries is going to put an incorrect age statement on a bottle.
Yeah.
You get into, especially the Central American producers seem to be some of the worst about it. But
And not just that, to take it a step further, they won't even put a number on a label that could be misconstrued as an age statement, because there are some, like Florida Cognac is one of the ones that it's not an age statement. If you look, it says it's Florida Cognac 18
extra aged or
extra
something like
aged.
that,
So
yeah.
it doesn't say 18 years, but you look at it, there's a big gold
see
18 on the
18.
front.
Yeah. And you're like, well,
an
it's
18-year-old.
18-year-old.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, there's actually been some controversy about that one recently, but countries that Doug listed, they wouldn't even put a number on it that could be misconstrued as an age, with one distinct exception in Barbados. But that's a different
So
story.
somebody getting into rum can do quite a exploration of rum for $50 or less,
Oh, easily.
absolutely.
and it would be a fun journey.
Yeah.
Very much so. There's probably more variants in rum across the spectrum than any other spirit, save maybe Scotch. Scotch is another hugely diverse spirit. Other than
I
that,
think I disagree with that. I think rum is way wider than Scotch.
I think it is.
Partially because Scotch is, it's obviously one country, and it's a very
Yeah, I guess to be
strict
more
set of
fair, you would
rules.
say whiskey, not just Scotch. Whiskey has a huge
Right.
kind of breadth of.
I mean, that's the thing that
flavors.
going back to what you're saying about people say rum has no rules. It's like, well, no, rum is just made in 50 different countries or something.
Yeah.
And every country has different rules. Some of them have almost no rules. So
So you'll have everything from what you're drinking now. That's the
Real
McCoy. That's just very elegant, maybe even austere. You compare that to this. This is an unaged Jamaican rum. They don't even taste like the same type of product. They are so wildly different.
Yeah.
And so for under $50, it's a roller coaster of different things you can go find, as opposed to bourbon. Frankly, everything under $50 in bourbon tastes kind of the same to me. There's just not a huge
It's more
diversity.
nuanced for sure.
Yeah, there's just, you're not going to grab two bottles that are just shockingly different.
Yeah, that's true.
So we're talking about islands, but when we talk about bourbon, we always talk about distillers and picking their kind of flagship products. Do you have 3 or 4 producers on a couple of islands that you go, if you're going to get into rum, here's where I would
Yes.
suggest you start?
So I'd say if you want,
You can't go wrong in Jamaica, honestly.
you can't really go wrong in Jamaica. There's Appleton is a bit different than the other Jamaican distilleries, but I still think Appleton 12 is probably one of the best values in rum. I think, again, you're probably talking $30-$35 tops.
Yeah, I think so.
And
Yeah.
it's a 12-year-old aged in Jamaica product.
A little low on the proof, but that's fine. It's a good entry.
Yeah.
I still keep it at home. I love it.
For other Jamaican rum, actually, a local distillery just brought in a whole bunch of Jamaican rum. William Price, that's up in Garden Oaks, Oak Forest area. They have an unaged white rum that we can try, and it makes the most amazing daiquiris, the most amazing cocktails. That's a great option. There's other options too, like more like cocktail rum. There's one called Rum Fire, which is from Hampton, which will taste an aged Hampton. That this is kind of an expensive bottle. That one's like maybe a $20-$25 bottle.
Rum Fire is the best unaged rum on the planet.
Is it really?
I love
St. Lucia, there's only one distillery in St. Lucia. St. Lucia Distillers.
How many in Jamaica again?
Jamaica's what? You have Hampton, Worthy Park. You have Appleton, and then you have Clarendon and Long Pond, which are kind of I think it's called National Rums of Jamaica. So there's basically 4.
And you don't pick out one. You say if you're on that island, you're good.
Yeah, you can't really go wrong.
Okay.
I mean, they're
The
different.
ones-
They are different.
That's what I mean. It's worth going through and exploring,
But they
seeing
have
what you like.
they are definitely
It's
different,
kind of
yeah.
like you saying Kentucky whiskey versus Tennessee whiskey. Like they do have I don't know. You get back to the distilleries themselves, and
Kentucky bourbon and Tennessee bourbon.
yeah,
Okay.
right.
But even within Jamaica, they'll make different, they call them marks. And what that means is a measure of the esters that are in the rum. Essentially just means how funky they are and how much body they have. So one distillery may make 10 different marks.
Oh, yeah.
And those can be very different from, the very, very low ester. Appleton is an example of one that usually uses much lower ester rums, up to some of the ones that are frankly kind of brutal to drink if they're unaged, they are so funky. So one distillery, just because it says Hampton on the front, it could be anywhere from not very funky to extremely. So even within one island, there's a huge range of rums.
The other one that we didn't bring any rum from Guyana, but there's a famous distillery there, and their base product line is called El Dorado, and they were one of these distilleries that typically had quite a bit of sugar in them, and they've recently really cut back the sugar. I think just in response to a lot of more educated consumers coming into the rum world, and you just taste kind of changing a bit.
Yeah, and it was kind of almost a little bit part of their heritage because the distillery is kind of part of the Demerara area. So you have a sugar named after this area. Yeah. It was almost kind of like part like
very, very,
the sugar is kind of part of the whole culture.
Yeah.
So people kind of gave them a little bit of a pass on that because it was so kind of ingrained in their rum making process. But like Doug said, they're putting out more stuff now that it's completely unadulterated, and some of that's really good. Doug and I actually went to a tasting for El Dorado a couple years ago when they were coming out with some new products. They were really good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I haven't tasted this yet, but this on the nose, this real McCoy is absolutely fantastic.
Good.
This one, I can't remember this particular.
I mean,
so this limited edition
Madeira.
was a combination of bourbon casks and Madeira wine.
Wow,
Oh man, the nose is just killer on this.
Yeah, when that didn't get discontinued because it was a limited edition, but when it started kind of disappearing, I went and bought all of that I could find.
This
because
is a batch that was made in 2016.
it's just so
it's-
good. At like $45 or $50 at the time.
Yeah,
You're going to hear me because and I just wanted to say, shout out to the distillery with your Jamaican.
Oh, William Price.
William Price, yeah.
Yeah, so we had Brian on the show
I like what they're doing over
a
there.
few
They do
months
some cool
ago,
stuff.
so-
They're doing some pretty cool stuff, and they got a big still in. Did you see their still?
It's
Yeah.
massive
pot still.
Forsyth
So
pot
awesome.
still, yeah.
So to go back to your question real quick, if I had to pick kind of my top 5 producers that I would look at, Foursquare is easily the number one because for most people coming into it, it's very approachable. There's a lot of similarities with if you're a bourbon drinker or Scotch drinker. There's some similarities there.
But
So it's an easy transition.
I'm going to have just to expand on that a little bit. Can you name 2 or 3 products from Foursquare that are going to be in that affordable price range?
Anything that says Dorley's on it
Dorley's, okay.
is going to
Just
be
total
the
wine only.
the
'Cause
one
I-
to go to.
When you say Foursquare, and I think somebody goes and sees Foursquare, the bottle Foursquare, it's like what, $70 to $100 or something.
There's
Right.
actually not a lot of Foursquare product that's labeled Foursquare out there, and it usually is a little bit more expensive. That's kind of become their flagship brand, if you
Yeah.
will. But if it's made by, it'll say either Foursquare or RL Seal Company on it somewhere.
RL Seal, okay.
So Dorley's, RL Seal, Real McCoy, those 3, all Foursquare product, but
Fantastic.
generally a little bit cheaper.
Okay.
And more readily available on the shelf. Foursquare can be a little hard to find sometimes. But yeah, Foursquare for sure. I'm a huge fan of Hampton in Jamaica. Also a big fan of Worthy Park in Jamaica. St. Lucia Distillers. Now the brand that you'll recognize is called Chairman's Reserve. That's their main brand. Fantastic distillery and very different from the rest of these on the table. I happen to really like it, but it's a little polarizing. What am I missing, Doug? I think those are if you get anything from any of those
Those are my
distilleries, they're gonna be
definitely my
great.
top 3. I mean, I really have I really love Appleton. I think
I
it was
do too.
it was probably the first rum that I was really like, this is just delicious stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then later I found Foursquare, which Appleton and Foursquare I feel like have a lot of similarities in there. They have a very balanced approach to rum. They're kind of trying to keep you from getting blown out in one way or the other. They're not too much oak, not too much funkiness. They're very dedicated to that, finding that right balance in their blends.
Is this on the climb up? Are we getting better as we
Yes.
continue to take? Seriously.
Yeah.
Because this is...
it's so good.
That's by no means the best thing on the table, but it's very good.
Yeah, we do have a couple of the high end Foursquare bottles.
These 2 Foursquares are the big brother.
2009.
Dude, that
I'm
is
drinking this
like-
Real McCoy 12-year. I mean, this is absolutely
Well, if
fantastic.
you guys are used to drinking, cask strength bourbon,
Yeah.
these are both basically cask
and-
strength rum, and they have all that punch of a 120 proof kind
Okay.
of spirit.
And funny enough, I brought the Real McCoy actually just to drink while we were talking. I didn't intend to include it in the tasting.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did.
Because if I'm just going to sit and
But then we
drink
started talking
rum,
about, a good entry point for people. I mean, this Real McCoy, I typically see Real McCoy at a Goody Goody.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm not sure why that is particularly. I'm not sure why I don't really see it at Specs or other stores, but
true.
I definitely see it at Goody Goody a lot. And then, but the Total Wine deal is like, it's one of the best deals in spirits, like period.
No, it's screaming. And I do want to clarify one thing I mentioned earlier: steering clear of rums from Spanish-speaking countries. Two notable exceptions: El Dorado that Doug mentioned. The other big one is Santa Teresa. It's actually a fantastic rum as well. Very well priced. I don't remember off the top of my head what a bottle is, but it's in the 20s.
The other one I'll throw in that category is if you want a really great Puerto Rican rum, I would not buy Bacardi. I would buy Don Q. There's a brand called Don Q, and they make some excellent rum.
Out of Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I do like Don.
But again, it's a much lighter style. It's not. I don't know. Some of
It's
these
not aged, right?
Generally no. Okay. Yeah, I think that's. That might be
do
one of the
age
ones where they age it and do the filtration.
I think that is true, actually. No, I mean this Real McCoy. I mean, I'm done with mine now.
That's really.
Well,
good.
you want to move on to Jamaica and get your head blown off?
Yeah, let's do that.
Well, we'll start with one that's not going to blow your head off. Well, this is a Hampton. This is the Hampton Great House Distillery Edition 2020. So my understanding is that they've done these editions for a few years, and they were typically only sold at the distillery at the Great House. And then because of COVID, they had a lot of product and not a lot of tourists. So they started distributing these. I think there's a 2019 that had a small distribution, 2020 had a much larger distribution. And I think there should be a 21, but this is kind of like the civilized Hampton, I would say.
Okay.
And I'm excited because I've actually not tried this. And as a quick aside, obviously people listening won't see this, but to me that is the greatest shape of any bottle ever. I love the shape of that bottle.
Okay, well, it does kind of fall into my category of fitting on the shelf.
It does. It like you see that shape bottle.
It's
and
sort of
it's gonna be good.
like a squat wine bottle.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, I love that. And like I don't know. You think of like rum bottles. That kind of thing gives you the thought of a rum bottle. You
look at
Something
some of
the old
these,
pirate
some of
would
the Chairman's Reserve, some of the Four Squares. They're in these like real squat bottles. And what I've heard is that one of the reasons they did that is because rums are real popular with sailors. And when you're on a sailboat, you don't want a big tall bottle when your sailboat is doing this.
I can
because
attest
it's gonna
that the
fall.
smaller
so
bottles are
you
better.
got your low center of gravity. Your bottle's going to be okay. So there's a lot of
that
makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Woo!
Okay, so
That is a very different.
You want to talk about nose on a spirit. Hampton in Jamaica it just gets into your nostrils and all through your sinuses and let you know from across the room.
It couldn't be more different than the nose that was on that Real McCoy.
No.
It's very, like the Real McCoy is very subtle, vanilla, kind of even a little banana ester, kind of very approachable.
Not like this.
This is like, holy crap, there's a lot going on there.
So when you said blow your head off, is that a good thing? Or
No, it's a good. Well, I don't know.
I think it's a good
different strokes for different folks.
Yeah.
But if you like the smell of sort of overripe mangoes and pineapples and all kinds of delicious tropical fruits, I think of like going into like the tropical fruit section of like one of the Asian groceries here in Houston. And you get all these like amazing smells, and it's like all in this kind of rum.
Yeah, I have terrible ways of describing things that make it seem really bad, but the description that I sometimes use for this, it's like getting a bunch of tropical fruits, putting them in a trash bag and leaving them on your porch for like a week in the summer. And it starts to kind of ferment and get a little funky. That's kind of what
It's a
Jamaican,
good funk.
It's a good funk.
It's a good funk.
It's almost like right when the tropical fruit's starting to turn.
Yeah.
And it's just like a really overripe banana.
Yeah.
That
you're kind of going,
smell.
should I really like this? I
Yeah.
don't know. But I
So
do.
Hampton's a distillery that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, and one of the interesting things about them is everything they do is natural fermentation.
Okay.
So it's just the yeast that's in the air, and it's in the molasses fermentation tanks. They're also known to use some of the. So they'll use some of the used wine. They call it
back set.
that's in the pot stills, and they will back set some of that into the new run, as well as like using. There's some speculation here. Nobody really wants to admit what's going on, but there's these you can look up stuff on the internet about muck pits where there's like sort of some of this stillage and some other stuff thrown in there. It's just kind of like out in the open, and what you end up having is it becomes a sort of a colony of both yeast and bacteria, and the bacteria that's involved is sort of competing with the yeast for the sugar.
Okay.
And what that does is it kind of stresses out the yeast.
Makes it work harder.
And it makes it work harder. And it's kind of like wine.
Yeah,
like
so the grapes are stressed
sometimes the great wines are when it's a really hot year or something. But you'll get these extra flavors. So you get these esters. And these Jamaican rums are really known for these esters that create these tropical fruit flavors from molasses. They're not putting pineapple in the rum, they're not putting mango in the rum, but you get those kind of flavors.
Yeah, and the analogy I would make if any of you guys have ever made sourdough bread,
sure,
the mother, a muck pit or a dunder pit is basically like the mother.
Okay,
it's constantly changing and evolving, and it's a living thing.
You got to continue to feed it,
and you continue to feed it with back set that comes out of each batch. There are some distilleries that will openly talk about their muck pits and talk about using them. Clarendon is one of the big examples. There are others that will, and maybe they don't use them. As far as I know,
this is really just a Jamaican thing. There's just really a couple distilleries in Jamaica that do this.
Yeah, and I mean, a notable example that doesn't, this bottle, super funky, but the distillery that makes it does not use dunder. I've talked to people at the distillery, and they say, no, we absolutely do not use dunder. But they still get this really funky rum.
But it makes me ask, the fermentation process, is it any longer because?
Oh yes, well, because whenever you're doing natural fermentation, it's going to take longer. If you add yeast, you add a whole bunch of yeast, they're ready to eat some sugar, right? So the fermentation is just going to occur quicker. I'm not sure how long Hampton fermentation is, but I would be it's days. It's many days to sort of get the fermentation to completion.
Yeah, I think some Jamaican distilleries may even ferment for
weeks, sometimes
2 or 3 weeks, maybe even a month.
I thought it might be longer.
And they're open top containers, so other natural
yeast
and bacteria.
It's an open top container that's been used for the last 100 years.
And
so you can only imagine like what kind of stuff's
Things
growing in the building,
and it's sitting in a building that's surrounded by cane fields that have yeast growing on them. So it's this whole environment. So, Rob, you asked about kind of regional variations before we got on. It's really more in the yeast and the style than it is, where the sugarcane itself is grown. Because, like I said, a lot of times the sugarcane is shipped in from Brazil or somewhere else. So it's the kind of the environment, the yeast that's living around the distillery seems to be.
That's cool. It kind of reminds me of like like Jester King in the Hill Country area.
Yeah, sour beers. Yeah,
that kind of thing. It's just like
it's the exact same idea.
Just let it do its thing.
I want to say, well, first I want to let the listeners know when we say Hampton, it's DEN, not TON. When you're looking for a label,
HAM.
So it's Hampton. But I want to say what you get on the nose with this Hampton and what you get on the palate are totally different.
Yeah, so good,
dude. You can't.
I don't get the funkiness on the palate.
Now, I'll say that we were talking about great value bottles. On the subject of Hampton, this is distinctly better than what I'm going to mention, but in the same vein and very similar, there's one called Stolen Overproof.
Oh, yeah.
It only comes in 375 milliliter bottles. Don't get the Stolen Smoked Rum.
No, that's
it's
terrible.
The Stolen Overproof. It is 6-year-old Hampton at 123 proof for $15 for 375.
They literally stole these barrels. I don't know how this happened, but basically there are some of the like high-end European bottlings has a very similar specification to these bottles, and they go for over $100 a bottle, and you can get it for basically $30 a bottle, two 375s for $15 a pop.
I mean, this would be akin to somebody going to Buffalo Trace and buying tankers full of Weller 12 and selling it for $10 a bottle.
Right. Yeah.
It's
and
ridiculous.
it's still around.
Except it's way better than Weller 12.
Tyler and I have done our best to put a dent in that supply, but Chris Hart from Houston Bourbon Society has also talked to some of the distributors, and some of this product is all over Texas and it's just not moving. And he's saying, just bring it to Houston, we will take care of this problem for you.
You talked about painkillers.
Oh man,
We'll make painkillers in the summer in a blender and use an entire bottle of Stolen in it.
It's amazing.
The proportions just work out perfectly, and you just make a giant batch of painkiller at one time. It is Stolen in a painkiller is my absolute favorite.
oh, I'm gonna have to try that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That or Chairman's. I like that little bit of funk in a painkiller because otherwise it can just be kind of one note.
Yeah.
But you throw something funky in there and it's really good.
Doug, how much did you say for this bottle, the Hampton?
This one I think was about $100.
It
But this
fantastic.
is really the flagship of the Hampton.
And if we want to
brands.
talk about diminishing returns, that is a much better bottle than Stolen, but not 10 times better.
Okay.
So that's a really cool bottle. I would love to have one. But for anybody listening, if you can find Stolen, it's a fantastic rum for the price.
So this is hard to find?
I got this one at Specs. I think it is. It's not a
one-time
It's
release.
not a very large batch.
Once a year release, or is it?
I think it's a once a year release.
Okay.
It is a bit difficult to find. There are some other Hamptons they kind of have on the shelf all the time that I've seen at Specs that are readily available. But the Great House is like really their flagship.
That's cool.
product.
Well, I want to bring up. You mentioned Houston earlier, and then you also mentioned rum hasn't kind of had that explosion yet. I think in Houston we're kind of unique to the rest of the country here in the States. That I think we have a lot of people who know a lot about a lot of different spirits. If we're going to talk about alcohols and things like that, I think you could say the same thing about foods and wine. I think Houston is just a great place for all of those kind of things if you enjoy them. But I started seeing more and more posts and discussions about rum, and leading the way was the Foursquare, like you talked about. We've seen tons of those, and those have been really what I've tried at friends' houses. Do you not see the trajectory of rum kind of taking off, or do you think it's still kind of
it's totally
people haven't figured it out
it's
yet?
It's going through the roof.
It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Nationally or just in Houston?
I think the social
Nationally?
media is a huge influence on this thing, and I think I never would have got into rum. I think unless I would have seen people posting in Facebook groups, and they're like, "Try this Foursquare."
Mm-hmm. That's
rum.
where I'm at. Yeah,
I'm like, this stuff is amazing, and people that I know that I trust their palate. Like I know they're just not there's no financial reason for them to say that. And you see people just drinking. I don't know. That's one of the interesting things about the sort of the scene here in Houston is you just see people kind of going down these little different rabbit holes of things, and you can pick up a lot of great knowledge from that. But
absolutely.
rum is absolutely exploding. It's actually the Europeans are way ahead of us on this whole thing.
Yeah, when I said internationally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
internationally.
Wow.
The U.S. is way behind. I mean, the U.S. is probably one of the biggest rum markets in the world, but
Historically,
if you
continental
look at
Europe
what's
has been
going
the
on in
biggest.
continental Europe, there's rum auctions that are going on there, and,
wow.
and bottles are going for thousands of dollars.
Wow.
Rum bottles, and you're like, anybody here, you'd be like, what are you talking about? $1,000 rum bottle?
well, I mean, we
Yeah.
see it in the whiskey world with bourbons and things
Yeah,
like that.
I mean,
and
if
I'm
you get down that rabbit hole far enough and the whole country follows, I mean, you can get that
Yeah,
scenario.
Germany and the Netherlands are two
And Italy.
huge, and
Italians,
Italy are
yeah.
huge rum consumers.
So that makes me ask the question. Obviously, there's limited releases. They make some special products and things like that. Is there anything that we would call, when we come from the bourbon world, allocated, that we know once a year they're only going to make a small batch of it, and then you got to try to get it if you can?
Probably
yeah.
the Foursquare, right?
The Foursquare ECS, the things like that Hampton, the Vellier releases, because those are always one-off. Those would be kind of the similar, the analogy.
Yeah, like that new Foursquare release, that Shibboleth, or I'm not really sure I'm
Chibboleth, yeah.
pronouncing it right.
Did a good job.
But I mean, I don't know that I saw one hit the shelf. Like, it was gone.
It's starting to get to that point. But there's also, like we said, there's a lot of great, very high quality rum that it's there all the time. But it's definitely increasing in popularity. I think people are picking up on the available quality and at a great price that's out there.
So we've talked a lot about the good in rum. We went through a lot of these things that we're drinking. I think it's only right that we make sure that people know there's some bad in rum, and we might as well kind of bring it out.
It's
and
probably
talk about
more
it.
bad in rum than any other spirit.
Well, it's one of these categories where I think people, they don't have a lot of experience with it, and what experience they do have is as a mixer. So, as a mixer, you talk about, Bacardi and Cruzan and stuff like that. And, it will definitely add alcohol to your drink. There's no question about that. But, does it actually add the flavors you want? And I think most of us, if we're going to have a cocktail, we want the spirit to bring something to the table besides just ethanol.
Sure.
We want those barrel flavors.
Otherwise, I would just go by Everclear and water it down.
Yeah,
and add that to every
absolutely.
drink.
If you're going to make your New Orleans daiquiri and you're going to pour in basically ethanol to just
It's a commodity at that point.
And add a bunch of sugar
So-
on top of that.
I mean, it has its place, but I guess I just encourage people to think a little bit deeper about the rum category. That it's more than Bacardi, it's more than Cruzan, it's
Captain Morgan.
Captain Morgan. Spiced rum is like a really interesting category. It's kind of like, it's almost like the gin of rum, or I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, but there's all the, basically it's you could put any kind of baking spices and sugar.
And that's what they're doing.
Yeah,
Making spice.
that's what spiced rum is.
It's not a natural, like from a rye whiskey where you get that
no,
spice.
no.
Okay.
No, it's actually adding cloves and sugar and nutmeg.
And to be clear, those are not a bad thing. There's a lot of history behind spiced rum, and a lot of rum that was drank back in the day. That's how
and
it was
even
consumed.
flavored rum, like pineapple rum or
Yeah.
coconut rum. But if I want to buy a coconut rum, I would rather have something that like actually used a coconut in the
Clement
process.
makes a great coconut
Clement
rum.
makes a very good.
So not a syrup
coconut
with
rum.
artificial flavor
Yes,
of coconut.
I'm not really keen on
I
the.
didn't even know that was available. Like,
Yeah, there are a few, but it's sort of
Well,
it's one of
and-
these things you got to look a couple levels deeper to
And
find it.
Plantation makes a great pineapple rum that uses whole pineapples that they put in
Skins and everything.
that
while
one
they're
is
fermenting.
really good.
So it's not pineapple extract. They're putting pineapples in the product while they distill it, and it's the best pineapple rum on the market.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay,
and,
we'll have to pick one of those up.
again. I mean, I think it applies to almost every spirit that it's the marketing people want to put a fancy box and a really pretty bottle in front of you and charge you $100.
Yeah,
And you sort of have to just resist that, and you say, you know what, I need to Google this.
if it has a pirate or a bird on it, I wouldn't
Stay
buy
away.
Well, hey,
dual research.
Hey, Dorley's has a macaw, so you
it. This is true. Yeah,
Oops, retract that statement.
there's just so much.
Pirate is a-
There's probably more
Probably bad
marketing BS and fluff in rum than just about anything else. And if you go down the bourbon aisle, it's all made by a handful of producers that have a pretty strict set of rules they have to abide by. Rum can be made in places where there's really no rules and it meets the TTB
Yeah, but
definition. So it's all about putting a cheap product in a package that has a lot of marketing on it.
When you talk about rum and marketing rum versus like marketing bourbon is like,
oh, it's a totally different thing. It's like my old granddad had this recipe, blah blah blah.
yeah, or it's Elmer T. Lee, or it's one of the old guys who made bourbon. But when you talk about rum and you talk about coming from the islands and you talk about
Exotic.
pirates and that island life, and
I mean,
Jamaica,
there was
you
a
can go a
whole
lot of different ways.
I mean, there was a big economy built off like getting rum over to Europe. I mean, from the islands, So I mean, you're talking about that pirate, that naval type of thing,
I mean, there was a time where sugar was the most valuable commodity in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, rum was born from that. So rum was very, very highly revered back in the day, especially among people in Europe and in the UK. And, the sugar beet killed the Caribbean sugar trade. But fortunately, rum hung on and is, as you mentioned, Rob, it's thriving today.
I mean, I'd go back to I think it's one of those categories where you just need to do a little bit more research. And like I said, my favorite is the fatrumpirate.com. I pretty much agree with everything he's ever written. The guy's just a straight shooter and tell you what's good and what's not
Say his
good.
name again.
thefatrumpirate.com.
FatRumPirate.com.
I think his actual name is Wes Burgeon, something like that.
Yeah.
He's a guy based in the UK.
Does he do anything on YouTube or any other social media, or is he
I
just
don't
kind
think
of
so. I think
he's on
basically just a
Facebook.
blog.
Okay.
He's on
He's on
some
Facebook.
of the rum groups, but it's
Okay.
pretty much just a blog. And then I don't think he has his own Facebook group though. He'll just be
No,
one of the ones I follow from staying in Australia for a while is an Australian rum Facebook group.
Rum is big down there.
Oh, huge in Australia. Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Interesting.
yeah, there's a couple Australian rum stories.
It's another British colony.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That makes
Yeah.
There's actually there's a Facebook group called the Ministry of Rum, and it comes from it started as a message board.
How do we not mention Hamilton yet? Yeah.
Yeah,
How do we not mention that?
yeah. There's a guy
mention
named
that
Ed Hamilton, and he has a super interesting story where basically, like, at one point he was just sailing around the Caribbean, and this was like in the '90s or something, like before anybody was really into this stuff. And he was like, "Oh my God, tasting rum at these distilleries is like I had no idea the kind of quality that existed." And then he started importing it through he created a company and a brand, and he's importing it through I think his company's on like upstate New York, and they do great rum. They started doing some interesting blends, like especially for like bartenders. But all his stuff is really, really good.
The White Stash is.
But
good.
yeah, the sort of the modern. The offshoot of that is this group called Ministry of Rum, which has a lot of great
that's a
information.
Facebook group.
It's on a
Yeah.
Facebook group.
Okay.
I'm on that.
It's a
and-
worldwide
Are you on
Facebook
that?
group.
Okay.
There's the Foursquare Rum Appreciation Group. That's a good Facebook group.
Yeah, but if you just want general rum, Ministry of Rum is where it's at.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you that, I like bourbon, and maybe it's because of the barrels and things that you were talking about, Doug, but, trying to get into tequila and into scotch and things like that. I'm getting there with scotch, it's been a bit of a journey, but I mean, just tasting through a few of these rums, I'm going, this isn't hard. This could overtake bourbon for
Are
me. I
you
wouldn't
are
be
you
shocked.
onto the Chairmans yet?
Not yet.
How good is that, dude?
Oh my god!
So there's a story about that one too.
Yeah.
This was Tyler and I.
Couldn't be more different,
So,
by the way.
so if you want to taste rum and you're in Houston, Texas, the place to go is on North Main Street. It's called Lay Low.
been many times.
And you should
And
probably
we're talking like top 10 tiki bar in America.
You should
This is-
probably go
it's a
there like
jewel.
early in the day. They open at 4 most days. They're closed on Mondays. And they must have, 200 different rums. There's a leather-bound book that's their sort of library of rum, and you could do small pours.
Yeah.
And by the way, they make the best drinks. Mixed
And they make
drinks.
the make the best some of the best cocktails. Period.
It's just silly how great.
Is this
that
where
place
I
is.
see you post some
Yes,
pictures with
yeah,
you and your
no,
wife
it's
going
pretty
there?
close to my house, and there's a
Yeah.
reason
You've
I
never
bought
been
my
there?
house
No.
in that particular spot.
I don't have a friend who's invited me there.
I live.
Well, Rob, you're invited, okay?
All live
I'm
close.
3
I
blocks
actually
away,
have
though.
I have a
Yeah,
garage
that's
apartment that
close.
is unoccupied at the moment. You can crash there.
There you go.
Oh,
Fantastic.
there
you go.
hey.
But the story is that the reps for St. Lucia distillers, they started coming out with some. Here's the thing: they don't really do single barrels in rum. They do custom batches. So these were all like custom batches of rum, and the reps had, I think, maybe was it 6 different.
It was about 6, yeah. They were off different stills,
Off different
ages.
stills that are all from St. Lucia, and we tasted through them with Russell, who owns Lalo, and we're like, man, you really need to bring this in. This stuff is really special, and like the price point is very reasonable. They had some stuff that was a lot older that was amazing, but
This was the best thing there.
you were getting into beyond $120 a bottle, which becomes much more difficult.
I mean, it was so good to the point that
What was
Doug
this
and
stuff
I,
like $60?
Yeah.
And
maybe
yeah, so
less.
it was brought through Tony K's, and they may still have a few bottles.
They
Even
might.
though this is probably 2-3 years ago we did this.
They told me about the last one, but that's what they say about every bottle they sell.
yeah,
You got the
it's-
last one.
It's
man.
like
the last
no,
one,
it's still
man.
like every time I go there, I'm like they've got to be done with this.
I mean, it was so
There's
good
still like
that-
one bottle. on
that
the
when
shelf.
we walked out, Russell walked out with us, and Doug and I told him, "Look, dude, if you don't bring this in, Doug and I have no means to do this, but we'll find a way.
Yeah.
We'll find a
Yeah.
store that will bring this in because it's that good."
That
Because
is
he was
amazing.
worried, you had a minimum commitment of a number of bottles you had to buy, and he was like, I'm worried about being able to use this or it selling in
No,
a store.
for a bar, it's very difficult because you can't really mix this in a drink and charge a reasonable price. It's got to be it's a sipping rum.
Well, yeah, I mean, any restaurant bringing in like a barrel of anything is a lot,
Yeah.
But this is awesome, man. I'm a big fan.
St. Lucia's, I think it just kind of like shows the very like local nature of rum that you could literally smell. You can smell a rum and be like, that's St. Lucia.
And I don't. So what are some of the kind of notes that you get off this that are maybe unique from the other ones? I'm just curious.
It's got to. I mean, it's very different from the Jamaican rum.
Yep.
Like the nose is a little bit more subtle. It's a more laid back, but it still has a little of that funky note. A little of that. Rotten banana kind of. I don't mean to say rotten banana.
The nose kind of reminds me a little of this one.
Of the Homer Clement.
Yes.
Oh wow.
There's one tasting note that I always get in St. Lucia that is very hallmark, and I was asking because I was curious if you would hit on it. It's almost a little bit like rubber or burning tires, not as much as Trinidad. There's a distillery there called Carrol that is even more so, but it's something kind of industrial.
I always get this I don't know. It's like the baking spice part of the spice cabinet and some black pepper and cloves and nutmeg and things like that.
Like what you said there, like I was just kind of speaking about the nose on it, but like and the finish
at 100 proof. That's what I was just looking at because I'm
Goes
going
on.
the finish on this is fantastic.
Oh no, that's it. That's 50 something.
50%. I thought. Did I read that wrong?
No, sir. It's about 112 proof.
Okay, 56.
So
It's got a little fire to it.
So to me, it does have kind of. I was going to mention this. It has kind of like a smoky kind of like something.
Yes.
It's like a burning tire almost. Yeah.
I'm not probably that. It's something like that.
That's the running joke with Caroni in Trinidad is that it tastes like a burning tire. But that's meant
Not
to
in
be
a bad
good
way.
thing. I kind of clown people because I don't love as much as I love this. I don't love
It's an
Trinidad as
interesting
much.
thing where it's some of the most expensive rum in the world because it's one of these. It's a distillery that's no longer functioning.
Okay.
So there's only a limited number of bottles out there in the world, and there's some very old rum. It seems to get better as it gets older, but it's very strange profile to it.
Yeah, that distillery was bought by Angostura, the company that makes
the
bitters
bitters,
and
yeah.
rum.
Oh, okay.
And they completely gutted it. They actually shipped a lot of those stills off to other distilleries, and those distilleries are using those stills now to make their own rum.
But some of that $1,000 bottle rum I'm talking about is Caroni.
Yep. And it's so
I'm
so
pronouncing that right.
special
I have
that,
no idea.
for example, one of the stills moved from Caroni to Diamond Distillers, which is Guyana.
It's Guyana,
or
Demerara.
Eldorado. That's who makes Eldorado. The still is so famous that Velier puts out a release named after the still. That's how famous the still is.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Dude, it's like almost like a campfire.
I love that.
But it's soft on the palate. It doesn't have anything that kind of beats up your palate. This to me is very approachable for somebody who wants to. I mean, I don't know how available it is.
It's if it's still available, there's not much left.
I mean, the typical chairman's reserve is very available.
and is the same profile.
The issue is it's typically 80 proof, so it's not. It doesn't. This is 112 proof, so it's just got that bigger intensity to it.
If you blinded this, nobody would think this was 112 proof. I wouldn't think.
No, I agree. It drinks way under proof.
Way under proof, but you get a finish on it that I call it the Kentucky hug. This would
It
go
does.
forever.
It does have the St. Lucia hug.
Yeah, the St. Lucia hug, where you go, wait, does it have a little more proof? And that's why I started looking at the bottom. I'm going, wait, this has a little more than what you get on the palate.
And the finish just goes forever.
Yeah, it's
fantastic.
on and on and on.
It's
I'm not going to
crazy.
say it's the highest quality rum on the table. It's probably the most memorable to me of all the ones on the table, or the most unique. There's just nothing else that's in the same ballpark. I mean, the Four Squares are objectively better rums, but that's just a really, really fun one.
So when you were talking about like Trinidad, is there a distillery in Trinidad?
Angostura, when they bought
Yes,
that distillery, they basically gutted it and turned it into your typical kind of Spanish distillery, multi-columns. It's
I don't know if there's any, I can't think of any rum brands that, it's a very large distillery. I think a lot of what they're doing is actually going into bitters, is going into Angostura bitters.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a brand now on the shelf called Angostura. They make some rum. It's okay.
But again, you're getting back
very
to
forgettable.
It's a multi-column. I mean, they're stripping most of the character out of the molasses, so you're not getting a lot of that character in it.
Yeah, that's a shame. Well, I mean, that country is just has a very interesting history.
Yeah.
So that's a shame that they kind of took that tradition.
I still have some of this real McCoy.
Oh, it's so good.
So good, but I'm chuckling over here because the nose is changing so much for me as I drink other things and then go back to this. I mean, I'm nosing this now.
Whenever you're done with that one, just sit on the table for a few hours and come back. The empty glass smell on that one's so good.
You know what I'm getting on this now? Like a stack of pancakes with some syrup on it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
The hallmark to me of our Barbados rum, for
awesome.
whatever reason, I think of red fruits. There's a lot of red fruit in it.
Strawberry, raspberries, things like that.
that's not what I was thinking.
It's and not to say that that's what it tastes like, but when I taste it, I can pick that out, and I can usually peg, okay, that's Barbados.
Okay.
That's like my Barbados thing is like more like almost like salted toffee.
Oh, there definitely is that.
Yeah.
For sure there is that.
I feel like it's more like estery, but softer, more like your vanilla mapley kind of notes, like what he's talking about. But I'm ready to try some Foursquare.
And you know what? Another one we are remiss to not mention.
Do you want to try the vintage or just go to the
Go to the big one.
You guide us.
Go to the big one.
All right, let's
Might
just,
as well.
I mean, I don't know what our time is on this point,
We don't have a time limit on a podcast.
but we're just gonna go to Dominus, which is how did you get this bottle, by the way?
From you.
Oh, from me. Okay.
You had several shipped in.
This
from
is
somebody.
so. This is an interesting case of talking about like allocated spirits and stuff, and especially with rum, sometimes it can get a little squirrely. So, as far as I know, like only a couple cases of this ever were sold in Texas.
And I think they were all North Texas.
Yeah, or Austin. I don't know, Austin or Dallas.
Not here.
I was able to find some in Florida, and my sister in Florida helped me out with this.
And then I have a second one that I got in Louisiana.
But this is a ex cognac, right?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I bet that.
So this was a combination of cognac aging, and so Foursquare is very sort of anti the concept of finishing, which is very popular in whiskey these days. I mean, these rums are aged. It's not finished in cognac. It is aged in cognac. I mean, it's multiple years. It's not a couple weeks,
6 months.
6 months. It's 3, 4, 5 years. And actually, let me see the bottle, and
That's a killer.
I can tell you how long it was.
That raisin note from the cognac comes through hard in that.
Yep.
7 years in the cognac cask.
Yeah, well, no wonder it smells like cognac.
So this is aged in cognac, not finished in cognac.
Dude, wow, that's awesome.
And this is also at 112 proof.
Well, and not just that it's cognac, but if it's cognac, that means it's French oak, which is a much spicier oak than American. So you're getting a lot. To me, I get a lot more spice on this one, and it kind of balances out with the fruit and the sweet.
And all of these
really good
are a combination of a pot stills and what they call a twin column still. So it is a column still. It's very similar to the stills that are used in bourbon, where it's kind of a simple column still. It's not the what they use in the Dominican Republic or Puerto Rico is like a multi-column. It's much more like a refinery type situation where you're really approaching the limit of distillation and you're removing almost all the the flavoring compounds. But this is it's sort of a simple column still mixed with a pot still. This is 10 years old. 3 years in bourbon and 7 years in cognac.
There's so much vanilla.
So have you ever heard the term?
That's what I was going to say.
Holy crap!
Have you ever heard the term batch distilled?
Yeah,
Sure.
So why that's important is a multi-column still is continuous. So it runs 24 hours a day. Work goes on one end, whatever if you're making rum, vodka, whatever comes out the other end. Yes, they're using a column, but it is a batch column as opposed to a continuous column. So it's really just like a pot still, except it's not shaped like a pot. It's shaped like a column. So it's got all the plates.
I don't think you're right about that, by the way.
I'm not?
No.
Why?
It's a continuous still.
I thought they were batch. I thought that's essentially a coffee still.
No, a twin column is still it's still a continuous still. It's just there's only 2 columns, and there's not as many plates, and there's a lot less stripping going on. I mean, if you want the pot still is the batch process.
But there are batch columns too.
There are hybrid stills that are especially popular with craft distillers, where it's like a pot still with a column element. And I think even Foursquare, they may have some. You can put plates in the neck of a pot still.
Oh yeah. That's what most bourbon distilleries use.
It's always a bit gray, but
if they use a pot still.
There's a big difference between batch distillation and column distillation. Yeah. But what's interesting is like the bourbon that we so love is continuous distillation on a twin column.
Yeah, I mean, is there much pot still bourbon? Or
there is not, and most of it is not that good.
Well, and if there is, there's a rectifier on top, which basically works as a hybrid as both a column still.
I mean, there's some of the craft distillers have like sort of. It's one of these things. Is like it's weird. It's just like bourbon does not work. I feel like bourbon does not work as well on a pot still. Like malt whiskey, single malt.
It has to be pot still.
It works great on a pot still.
I think
rum works great on a pot still.
Doesn't Scotch whiskey legally have to be, or
single
malt has to be pot still.
Single malt has to be pot still, and blended whiskey is usually a blend.
Can be column,
with a column.
Well, the other interesting thing about the stills,
and Irish whiskey is usually a column.
Almost always column, yeah. Interesting thing too about Foursquare and some other distilleries.
Actually, I take that back. I think Irish whiskey is usually a lot of times pot stills.
I think
triple distilled pot still though.
I thought Irish whiskey was like a coffee.
They invented it. That's why I'm getting a little confused. But I think like you talk about Redbreast and some of those, and it's actually it's a pot still, but it's a triple distillation rather than double. Scotch is usually a double distillation.
Yeah, that's right.
So the pot stills that are used by Foursquare and some others are really interesting in that they almost do those 2 or 3 stages at once because they have something called a retort, and it's essentially a little box that you load up with some of the low wine, and it kind of goes back through so it distills and then goes back through that retort and keeps distilling on its way out.
Yeah.
And so depending on how you load that retort, you can make it a little bit heavier bodied, lighter bodied, a little funkier.
It's really
so there's a lot they can play with.
It's sort of the like state of the art of the 1800s that everybody in the Caribbean has kind of settled on. It's actually very similar to the you hear in bourbon they have something called a thumper, which is very similar to a retort. But the double retort pot still is like sort of the top notch in the Caribbean. So most of the Jamaican distilleries have double retort pot stills. Foursquare has double retort pot stills. St. Lucia distillers, Demerara distillers in Guyana. It's all double retort pot stills.
That Chairman's Reserve, what's cool about that one, I've talked about how important stills are. They actually name the stills on that one too. It's a Vendome and a John Doerr still. Both pot stills, but both very, very different. But Vendome is a very, very famous company that...
in Louisville, Kentucky,
yeah, they're from Louisville.
Oh, really?
And so you will see those all over the U.S. Vendome is a very big
also,
U.S.
I mean, St. Lucia.
Yeah.
This is fantastic.
Dominus is a killer.
Dude, this is like... Thank you for sharing this because I've never had it.
Oh my gosh!
Dominus quietly is probably the best thing Foursquare has put out. It's that or Criterion for me.
When did this come out?
It'll say on the front, 2018.
2018.
So I had I thought the best thing that I had from them was that Hereditas or like whatever.
That's a very different one.
That's a sherry cask.
And it's a sherry cask that I think was treated with sulfur because they get some kind of matchstick out of it, which is I like it. I like it, but it's
asked
different.
Richard Seal about that, and his comment was it's actually from the wine. It's not from any kind of burning
sulfites in the wine
because it definitely has that matchstick quality. That
but it has that. It has a sulfur quality to it.
It's good.
It's very delicious.
It's very good.
I like that one. I think I like this better. This is just all things and very different.
It's better.
It's very different, but like it's all things sweet and it's
I'm not getting
naturally
raisin on the nose. Maybe my nose is wore out after.
I get raisin,
but I'm still getting I'm still. I don't know.
I still get a lot of red fruit on this. The kind of
I'm getting more red fruit,
cherry, and different kind of berries.
It's almost got like even a little bit of that.
Ton of
like,
that toffee too.
Well, maybe I'm confusing toffee with like a subtle tobacco, like just a hair of that kind of going on in the back.
I mean, that's probably, like you said, it's this cognac barrel would be French oak, which would be more tightly grained, a little more tannin in there.
My God, that's so good.
Yeah, that one's really good.
That one is really good.
Yep.
Holy crap.
Yeah, if you can track that down, it's worth getting. I don't know what
Good luck.
a secondary
Good
on
luck.
it now would be.
so it's not an annual release. It came out in 18, and that's it.
That's it. So
No,
there's
all
ECSs.
of these are one-offs.
So
Well, thank you for sharing that, because I know your bottle's not, Doug. It's not
This was
full.
this one I sold to Tyler, so it's his bottle.
Tyler, thank you for sharing that.
I've got another one at home, fortunately, but it's. I mean,
So
it's,
Doug sold you two.
he gave me that one, and I got another one from Louisiana
Okay,
That's
fantastic.
because, as he mentioned, it just didn't seem.
It was
find its way
a
to
weird
Houston.
deal where it like really never released in Texas, and we had to kind of hustle around to find it somewhere else.
But the other one I mentioned, Criterion, is as that one is ex bourbon and ex cognac. The Criterion is ex bourbon and ex Madeira, which is the same as that Real McCoy 12 that we had, and it is. I think it was from 2017.
It's spectacular.
It is spectacular.
holy moly. This is, well, I got to try that too. This is awesome. Like, really awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and that we've kind of gone through now, I think, the kind of range of what rum can be. And there's more stuff out there too, but
it's a wide range, right? I mean,
a
you're
huge
seeing
range.
that. It's very, very wide.
Well, my takeaway from this is it is absolutely something I enjoy. And I would say if you're into bourbon, and I think, you know, a lot of people who listen to our podcast, we do a lot of bourbon things. We're bourbon guys. I'm not going to kind of get away from that. But this is absolutely something I'm going to start exploring more. I mean, I enjoy this. This is something, if you don't find good, you know, what you're looking for, what you want in the bourbon kind of community, you know, branch out. Get into rum.
I feel like bourbon. I feel like bourbon is typically like one of the reasons we like bourbon is it's kind of sweet. It's
Yes,
that corn.
I agree.
Is kind of sweet.
Vanilla, honey, kind of.
And it's the rum is like some of the rums are not that far off.
No,
of
I agree. The
bourbon.
brown sugar, the kind of
and hopefully the big takeaway is something like this Dominus is very dry. It's not sweet. Rum is not supposed to be sweeter than anything else.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think it's any sweeter than some of the bourbons I've had.
No, it's
That's
not.
my point exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's you get those
and-
same kind of notes, but it's just different.
Yeah, it hits different for sure.
To me, on the palate, this is everything we've had tonight doesn't beat up my palate like it could if you were to pour a Booker's for somebody or something like that.
Yeah, and not to dog on.
I mean,
bourbon,
some of these
but-
are 120 proof. So
Right.
It's not like it's not lightweight stuff.
No,
Yeah.
Not to dog on bourbon, but if we're sitting around talking about bourbon, we're talking about, oh, this is vanilla and pipe tobacco, and it's kind of all the same things. We've talked about burning tires, rotten bananas. I mean,
Red fruit.
the range of flavor notes is just so much more broad than.
Yeah.
So to sit around and share with people, I think rum's a lot more fun because there's so much more to talk about.
Yeah.
I can give you the best bourbon you've ever had, and you go, it just tastes like a better version of what I've had before.
I think
rum, it's like I've never had
it's a
something
lot of
like
fun.
this.
We just kind of like took like a quick trip around the West Indies, which, you know, and it didn't cost us very much, so that was great.
let me
I
ask.
like the way you put it there. That's really nice.
Are you guys cigar guys? Mm-hmm.
I'm not, but
You're not. Do you prefer cigar with a bourbon, a Scotch, or a rum?
rum.
Rum?
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, because
Cigars and rum come from the same place.
I'm tasting this going, I would think a cigar.
Well, we had that last night,
which was fantastic
like-
with that.
Yes, 2004 with a cigar is one of the best.
I
any
so
cigar
enjoyed that.
is
last
one of the
night.
best
That's
pairings.
what we had.
Yeah, I
And
saw.
it was amazing.
That's one of the best pairing. I mean, I enjoy
again, good luck
bourbon or Scotch
finding
with
the
it, but
Foursquare 2004 because that was out in like probably 2016 or something.
Funny enough, as I was pulling bottles out for this, I found a 2004 that I didn't realize I had. It
He found one.
It's got a
It's like finding
was
a
so
$100 bill in your pocket.
kind of is. I was super happy.
Dude,
I think I
that
even
is
texted you like,
so
"Look what I
good.
just found."
That 2004 is killer.
Now it's interesting if you lined it up with the Dominus in this 2009. I think it might be a little underwhelming. It's very
really?
straightforward. There's really nothing about 2004 that is kind of outside the mold or kind of
I haven't
weird,
had it in a while, but I
But
mean,
it's
my
just,
memory of
everything
it is
about it is so it's very tight.
it's a
very
little
good.
it's a little bit younger than the other vintages. It's only 11 years versus 12, which is not really a big difference. But I have this memory of it just being very vibrant.
It is. It's very bright.
Yeah, very bright.
Well, the thing is, and we do this all the time on the show. We'll compare things and go, my gosh, this is like just the absolute best. But if in that comparison you were to have any of those just one off, you would say, this is freaking awesome.
Oh, it's incredible. Right?
Well, it's like a guy told me one time I was buying a TV at Best Buy, and I said, man, that one looks so much nicer. He goes, man, get any of these in your living room. It's the best TV you've ever had.
Yeah. I think
So if you're comparing things, it
Rob
can be a
made
little
that point
unfair.
about diminishing returns, and it happens.
Yeah.
So if we
And
had only
the
brought...
other quote I love is that comparison is the thief of joy, and it
I
absolutely
agree with
is.
that.
It absolutely is.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
You could be drinking some great stuff, and somebody puts something that's a little better, and you're like, God,
Yeah.
Well,
man,
yeah,
I don't
if we
like
had-
this nearly as much.
If we had only brought the real McCoy, the Chairman's, and maybe the aged agricole, we would be saying the same things about the real McCoy. We had that second, and you made the point, Rob. Are we on the way up because this is so good?
Yeah.
Yeah. The other
We're
ones end up blowing it away.
Very
But
much on
in
the
a
way up.
vacuum, yeah, it's great rum.
It's fantastic.
But if you were to do that, like what you guys were saying, that real McCoy is like $45, $50. Any of these four squares are like closer to
80 to 100, yeah.
Or is it double as good?
I think it is.
I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah, but
especially
That
when,
comes down to if you have, the means.
Yeah.
If not, if I didn't have the means, there are Dorleys on the shelf for $20 that I would be thrilled to drink every day. And actually, I do drink those.
Here's a
all the time.
question
I
I
drink
have.
them more often than these.
Here's a question I have for you, Tyler and Doug. I'm going to kind of use a golf analogy here. If I'm hitting a, Precept Laddie versus a Pro V1.
It's a throwback reference.
Yeah. versus a Pro V1, I can't tell the difference. I'm not a good enough golfer. Can somebody who's drinking the real McCoy versus a Four Square 2009 or something like that, is it enough where you say it's worth the spend? You can tell the difference, or do you go, dude, live in
blind,
this?
you're drinking these blind.
Yeah.
I think you
That's the
would.
problem is that nobody drinks anything blind.
I would say
Okay.
I would say yes, because the more experiences we have in life, the more dulled we get to how exciting an
Sure.
experience is. So if you have no experience with rum, but you can stomach it, you're fine with the proof. So get that out of the way. But if you just don't have any experience in rum, if I gave you the real McCoy, you would say this is life changing.
Absolutely.
But if you've drank a ton of rum or a ton of other spirits, and you go, this is really good, and then we move on to something else, you go, yeah, this
Okay.
is way
Well,
better.
maybe that's where I'm at
It's
tonight.
it's all about the context. So for somebody that has never really drank rum, go out and get a Dorley's and a Stolen, and you are
Okay.
going to be super super happy.
Or you can go to Lalo and get
Or go to Lalo, yeah.
a whole flight of different
You can
And
just
so,
try
I mean,
a bunch of stuff.
yeah.
Doug and I, we don't sit at home drinking, Dominus and 2009 every night. It's drinking the everyday stuff that's the Dorley's or the Stolen that is fantastic and not a whole lot less in quality than these other ones at a fraction of the price. So
Yeah.
yes, to your point, absolutely there's a huge diminishing return. Then the question is it worth it? To me, yeah.
I mean, you have to get to that point where you can see, you can tell the difference and appreciate that.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And until you get there, live in this world.
Well, and I mean, somebody that's never really drank wine that wants to get into it, you're not going to throw them a Romani Conti or
No.
Yeah,
yeah. something like that. You're going
Yeah.
to give them. You're going to build your way up to that.
I love the Wade Woodard. It's a journey.
It is, yeah. That's the fun.
This is our rum journey.
It's our rum journey. Well, guys, I appreciate you coming on and talking a little bit about rum. I'm definitely, after this experience, a fan. And, if you come back over to the house, and I hope you do, you'll see more bottles of rum in the house because these are fantastic. I don't know
Should
what
we
I'll be
do
able-
a follow-up episode of rum cocktails?
We actually brought some stuff to make a just legit daiquiri. We may do that
Well,
off
I would
the air,
like
and we
to
can come
do
back to that.
because I have a perception of a daiquiri,
Oh, Doug can make
and I'm
you
not
a daiquiri.
sure it's accurate.
Me,
Okay.
I think you're the daiquiri expert over here.
All right, so we're not going to close out
I
the
think
show. We're
I think
gonna have a little
Johnny's
cocktail
Gold Brick
and then
is
come back to it.
pretty much has a Tyler Martin daiquiri on the menu.
Yeah, so I'm a big daiquiri fan.
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to come back and do a follow-up on rum, but we're going to have a daiquiri tonight. We'll put that in the memory banks, and the next episode when we discuss rum, we'll kind of talk about what that daiquiri is.
Rob, I'm telling you, this is a deep rabbit hole.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Well,
deep.
and so real quick, there's a lot of rum drinks that have a really bad rap. Daiquiri is one of them. Like a hurricane. If I say hurricane, you think of a red drink that's super sweet.
The traditional
A
hurricane.
Pat
should,
O'Brien's.
a hurricane should not be red.
No, it's
Okay.
not.
It should be yellow.
I would have never thought that.
It's a passion fruit.
And a
yeah.
real daiquiri, a real hurricane is unparalleled.
It's so good, dude. It's so good.
Okay.
So, yeah. Anyway,
Future rum episodes.
we're
coming
going to be
up.
doing like a
Tyler and I have a
lot.
lot more rum than is on the table right now.
The
A
much
lot
maligned
more.
rum cocktails, that can be the next one.
This is rum basics. This is just kind of
Yeah, we're just getting started.
We'll get back into this a little deeper.
Well, thanks guys for coming on. We really enjoyed the conversation. And
Thanks for inviting us.
Ton of fun.
so listeners know we're not done with our night. We're going to go ahead and eat some good food, have some wine, and finish out a Saturday night.
And more rum.
And
Yeah,
rum.
more rum.
Thanks everybody for listening to this episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey in Your Own Backyard. And until our next episode, enjoy your next pour.
Hopefully it's rum.
Should be.